Okay, battery's disconnected. Shame I didn't film me opening a bonnet, but you'll have to believe me on this one. Giant rat came running out of the bonnet as soon as I opened it. Okay, so next up, got to remove all the stuff that's on the front of the dash. So that's what it looked like. Okay, so now I've got to deal with that. Okay, still got to sort that out. There were actually 4 cables which weren't part of the pile and were just tangled in it. The front pile and the back pile. This is a 12 to 5 volt step down converter, and so I want to clean this up and distribute these around the front. And also a dual voltmeter. I'll have to set the damn clock again. Well, it's looking a little more empty now. That, only about that deep. There's actually a hell of a lot of space behind it. Got the DAC switch here. I was thinking of moving that up here, owing to how little either of us actually uses it, and putting the voltmeter in here, which is something we do use more. Yeah, that actually looks pretty good. I think we're just going to sit this on top and pack Sugru in around the edge. It'll look a little jankier, but on the other hand it doesn't require any permanent modifications. And then we've got our Lightforce RJ45 joiner. Yep, again looks pretty good. Holding a door. Hold the door. Use a screwdriver to push that in and it'll drop right off. So now, of course, being careful that is an airbag, we can reroute the dashcam cable to be somewhere nicer. So that should keep it out the way of where the airbag will hopefully never deploy. Then we go down there on the inside. Looks like white is ground. Okay, now to solder that. That's all good. Absolutely 0 points to Uniden here for recessing the RJ45 socket so far in that when you go to unplug it, the only way to remove it is to put a screwdriver in there, then have the top of the socket break off. That should be enough. Alright, PL259. Alright, so got that on there. Well, it's in there. Not the neatest, but it'll do. In case you're wondering why I've got a fuse on the negative side as well, there exists the possibility for the negative side being between the battery and through the chassis of the car, through the chassis of the radio, being the only connection between the negative side of the battery and the chassis of the car. This will of course result in the power for everything else in the car potentially running through the radio and through that cable, up to and including the starter motor. You don't want that. So that cable plugs into the back of that dash panel, and the radio powers on, but I'm not exactly wanting to transmit into a spool of RG58, that makes a pretty poor antenna, so let's connect the antenna. So I'm actually going to steal this spot, which was previously cabled to the back, and we can work out somewhere else to put this one. So there's a slight problem with SO239s, and that is some of them are kind of imperial, some of them are sort of metric, in case you wondered how this could possibly get any worse. So this one here, now the RFI antennas are unusually kind of cut in the metric standard, so they have quite tight threads, so that goes on only up to there for this one. Actually this one, which looks a little better made and is actually brand new, says it's an NBC connector, which is what RFI call 2s. Maybe I just do use this one with the screw-in fitting pretty much all the way. The only downside is this is one of the ones where you just screw the coax into the end of it, and I don't particularly like that kind. I'll just put some glue-lined heat shrink over it and hopefully it'll be fine. So now you cut the coax, fold it back like that. Now you may need to give that a bit of poking around to ensure that wire actually goes into the center. But then you're just left with this, and then you just got to solder that in. Okay, that's adequate. So then we heat shrink this over there. So do that nut up tight, then drop this on here. Now this spreads the load of the antenna onto the antenna base, and stops you from undoing that nut every time you do up or undo the antenna. And there it is, screwed all the way down. Alright, so double ender. So now we connect one of these to the CB, one of these to the power meter. Okay, so I've got a SlimCat 6 cable and a piece of 5-core trailer cable pulled to the other end. The trailer cable is going to be used to send the ignition switched power down to the back to tell the box at the back that the car's switched on, and also send sense wire from the battery to the front so we can see the battery voltage. Well, I can finally get rid of the blue wire and replace it with the yellow one. Alright, blue wire is out. Okay, so now we've got that cable properly in the door sill rather than just a piece of blue hookup wire that snaked around to the back of the car. So we've got plus coming from the fused input to the charge meter, minus coming off the distribution board. Now let's plug this in and there we go, but that should be able to sense when the car's started through the yellow wire. So the random blue wire and the cable to the battery meter are now down here instead of running across the floor. Okay, so Haynes manual says remove the steering wheel, but this little panel in here actually unclips from the top of that, so that is actually in no way necessary. Prior experience with Haynes manuals and a certain BMW tells me that it would practically tell you to remove the steering wheel before changing the spark plugs. Well, there she is. Okay, so after attacking it with the air duster to get it pretty clean, because we don't want to introduce any dust into and behind the glass, let's swap it over. By the way, should you be crazy enough to be willing to do this, this part's only about 50 bucks. So the old one left away a few annoying goodbye presents, but does that not just look a million times better? And there it is. I've just found something interesting here. So all these switches are keyed. You can see the keying patterns here. So this one won't go in the top right, it goes in the top left. But the funny thing is, both of these blank spots have different keying patterns in them, and the DAC switch, which was previously down there, is correctly keyed for this one. Huh. The light force one is definitely a different green, and the DAC switch is a different green. Okay, so I thoroughly hate myself for this, but I'm using 2 pieces of blue hookup wire to extend this because I literally don't have anything better. Really not sure what's going on with that one. 4 here, especially if I cable tie it in place. Will we be able to put the car back together? Is all this stuff going to work? Will the car ever start again? Stay tuned for part 2 and you'll find out.